I never imagined that $1 could weigh more than 27 million. But the moment the probate attorney slid that tiny cashier's check across the polished mahogany table, it felt heavier than my entire life. My brother smiled. My aunt laughed. Even my father's longtime business partner looked relieved. I just stared at the check with my name printed across the front. $1 single dollar. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then my brother leaned toward me with that familiar smirk I'd hated since childhood. I guess Mom and Dad finally admitted who the disappointment was. The room erupted with uncomfortable chuckles. I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of them. Because something felt wrong. Very wrong. And 20 minutes later, the judge would discover why. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 36 years old, and until 8 months before that hearing, I lived what most people would call an ordinary life in Denver, Colorado. I taught 8th grade history at a public middle school. The job didn't make me rich. It barely covered my mortgage on a modest townhouse and the student loans I'd spent nearly 12 years paying down. Still, I loved my students. My parents used to tease me that I could have joined the family business and earned 7 figures. Instead, I chose a classroom. They never criticized me for it. In fact, they seemed proud. My father, Richard Donovan, built one of Colorado's largest commercial construction companies from almost nothing. My mother, Evelyn, handled the finances. Together they created an empire worth nearly $27 million. Despite the wealth, they insisted my brother and I earn our own way. My older brother, Brandon, had different ideas. He joined Dad's company straight out of college. Everyone assumed he'd someday become CEO. From the outside we looked like a successful American family. Inside, we were slowly breaking apart. Brandon always needed more. More money. More praise. More control. Every family dinner somehow turned into a conversation about what he deserved. Dad usually changed the subject. Mom simply watched him with quiet disappointment. Looking back, I think she already knew exactly who he had become. Then everything changed. My parents were killed by a drunk driver while driving home from their mountain cabin. One phone call shattered my entire world. For weeks I couldn't even think about money. I only wanted one more conversation. One more hug. One more Sunday dinner. Instead, we buried them. 2 months later came probate court. I expected the estate to be divided fairly. Maybe 60-40. Maybe 50-50. Anything reasonable. Instead, the attorney announced that Brandon inherited the construction company, 3 vacation homes, investment accounts, artwork, classic cars. Everything. Then he looked at me. Claire Donovan receives $1. The courtroom became painfully quiet. I honestly thought I had misheard him. $1? I searched the attorney's face. No emotion. No explanation. Brandon looked almost proud. Like he'd won something. My Aunt Patricia whispered loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. I told you Richard finally realized which child mattered. The words hit harder than the inheritance itself. For the first time since losing my parents, I questioned whether they'd ever loved me. The hearing ended. People began filing toward the exit. Brandon walked beside me carrying folders worth millions. You should have joined the company, he said casually. You made your choice. I nodded without answering. Because if I spoke, I'd probably scream. As I reached the courtroom doors, the judge cleared his throat. Miss Donovan. I turned around. Please remain seated. The attorney froze. So should everyone else. Suddenly the atmosphere changed. The judge held up a sealed envelope. This was discovered inside the courthouse vault this morning. Nobody moved. The envelope is addressed specifically to this court. The attorney frowned. I've never seen that before. Neither had Brandon. For the first time all afternoon. He looked nervous. The judge carefully broke the seal. Inside was another document. Not another will. Instructions. Signed 6 months before my parents died. The judge read silently for nearly a minute. His expression changed. Then he looked directly at Brandon. Mr. Donovan, did you ever inform this court that your parents required annual forensic audits of the construction company? Brandon blinked. No. Were those audits conducted? Silence. The judge continued reading. According to the document, my parents suspected someone inside the company had been stealing millions over several years. If they died before completing their investigation, the estate was never to be distributed until an independent accounting firm completed a full financial audit. The courtroom exploded with whispers. Brandon's face turned pale. The judge wasn't finished. There is also a handwritten letter. He unfolded another page. If you're hearing this, then someone we loved may have betrayed us. My mother's handwriting. I'd recognize it anywhere. She explained that the $1 inheritance wasn't punishment. It was protection. She believed whoever was stealing from the company would immediately target the primary heirs. She intentionally kept me away from the business because I was the only child she completely trusted. The room became silent. I couldn't breathe. My parents hadn't abandoned me. They'd been trying to save me. Then came the sentence that changed everything. If Brandon attempts to interfere with the investigation, he is to receive nothing. Every eye turned toward my brother. He looked ready to collapse. Within days, forensic accountants arrived. So did federal investigators. Records disappeared. Hard drives had been wiped. Invoices were missing. But money always leaves a trail. Over the next 4 months, investigators uncovered fake subcontractors, inflated material purchases, shell companies, and forged approvals. Nearly $9 million had quietly disappeared from the business over 7 years. Every fraudulent payment eventually led to companies secretly controlled by Brandon. He hadn't just stolen from the business. He'd stolen from our parents. Employees who'd remained loyal for decades finally spoke. One project manager admitted Brandon ordered him to destroy accounting records. Another executive confessed Brandon threatened to fire anyone asking questions. The evidence kept growing. Every new document made me sick. This wasn't simple greed. It was systematic betrayal. During one interview, investigators found something even worse. Brandon had secretly tried convincing Dad to sign revised estate documents while Dad was recovering from surgery. Dad refused. Mom immediately contacted their attorney. That meeting resulted in the sealed instructions eventually delivered to the judge. They'd seen the danger coming. They just hadn't expected to die before finishing the investigation. The criminal case lasted almost a year. I attended every hearing. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted answers. When Brandon finally testified, he blamed everyone else. The accountants. The economy. Former employees. Even Dad. He accepted responsibility for nothing. Then prosecutors displayed hundreds of financial transfers on giant courtroom screens. One after another. Date. Amount. Shell company. Luxury purchase. Private account. The jury barely needed 3 hours. Guilty. Multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and financial crimes. He was sentenced to prison. Watching him led away wasn't satisfying. It was heartbreaking. Because I wasn't losing an enemy. I was losing the brother I wished I'd had. After the criminal proceedings ended, probate resumed. This time under the instructions my parents had left. Brandon's inheritance was revoked. The stolen assets were recovered wherever possible. The company was reorganized. Instead of selling it, I appointed an experienced executive team my father had trusted for years. I never wanted to become CEO. I remained a teacher. But I accepted ownership. Every year the company now funds scholarships for first-generation college students across Colorado. Something my mother always dreamed about. On the first anniversary of my parents' deaths, I visited their graves. I placed 2 white lilies beside their headstone. Then I laid the original $1 check between the flowers. I never cashed it. I never will. Because it reminds me that appearances can hide extraordinary truths. Sometimes love looks like rejection. Sometimes protection feels like abandonment. And sometimes justice simply takes longer than pain. If my parents had divided everything equally that first day, their life's work might have disappeared forever. Instead, they trusted truth to survive them. And eventually, it did. Today, when people ask about my inheritance, I simply smile. I inherited much more than money. I inherited my parents' integrity. And that's worth more than $27 million.